you wrote this line. You probably read it over at least once. An editor read it, and there's a pigeon that's almost flying into my house, and no, you're gonna stay outside. Hi, my name is Kat, Faerie librarian, and welcome to a video. Today I will be going over my July wrap up. I've read quite a lot in July. Like, I've been feeling a little slumpy throughout a couple of months, and I think that the slump has officially ended, so that is really nice. So July, a lot was going on. I participated in GameNightathon, which is a readathon hosted by Cleo from the Bemused Bookworm. We had to find our way through a labyrinth to collect objects, and the objects were the prompts, and we got to interpret them however we wanted. So as long as we could like link the book to the object that we were collecting, it worked. So yeah, that is the objective of the readathon. So with every book I will tell you what object it worked for and then my thought process, because I think that's really fun. I really enjoyed that format of readathon, actually. I think it was really fun to be able to sort of like use our creativity to see how we were going to interpret a prompt. I think that was a lot of fun, so I hope that that'll stay in next year's edition of GameNightathon as well. Then July was also the start of HRCYED, which is the hardest reading challenge you'll ever do. It is hosted by Q from the channel Cordy, and it's basically a reading challenge comprised of 25 reading challenges that, you know, I'm working on. It started on July 7th, so there's 2 books that I'm going to be talking about that I read before that date, so they don't count for HRCYED. But for the others, I will always tell you what prompts I use them for, because you can use every book for up to 2 prompts in HRCYED. But yeah, I will first go over some stats, then I'll talk about the books in the order in which I read them, and then at the end I will pick my favorite book of the month. So let's get into it. So in the month of July, I read 8 books, good for a total of 2,608 pages, which is not a lot of pages per book. It's definitely shorter than the average book I typically read, I feel like. But yeah, that's just how it worked. One of those was a reread. In terms of my rating, my average rating was a 4.19, which is pretty good. And I had only 1 book that was under 4 stars, so pretty happy with that. In terms of HRCYED, it's like a bingo board thing, and I made the bingo board so that the color of the square represents my progress in that particular challenge. So if it's white, that means that I haven't read anything for it yet. If it's pink, then that means that it is between like 1 and 24% completed. Yellow is 25 to 49%. Green is 50 to 74%. Blue is 75 to 99%. And then if I did the whole thing, it becomes purple. So in the month of July, I read 1 out of the 10 books that I needed for the series Staircase. I've read 1 out of the 11 books that I needed for the Last 10 Years challenge. I've read 1 out of the 9 books for the Heritage Month challenge. 1 out of the 13 books for the Even Bigger Rainbow Challenge, 1 out of the 4 books for the Avatar Challenge, 1 out of the 5 books that I need for the Animals Challenge, 1 out of 10 books I need for the BIPOC Challenge, and 2 out of the 12 that I need for my own personal challenge, which is completing the Rainy series Takedown challenge. I already had 4 squares on that completed before the start of work yet, so my challenge is to just do the other 12 in that challenge. But yeah, I feel like I did a pretty decent job. I have in total completed 4.57% of like the entire thing. That number is probably not fully accurate because the total number of books that I would need to read to finish the whole thing is probably not accurate, because there's 3 challenges in here that I don't know how many books I'm going to have to read for them. So I did an estimate, but it's probably wrong. Like my estimation is probably like more books than I actually, would need to read for those. So it's actually percentage-wise more than this 4.75%. In order to be fully on track, like 1/12 out of a year, because 1 month would be 8.33%. So I'm still a little behind, but it's fine. Also, I have 1 book that I already mentioned you can use up to 2 prompts. There's 1 book on here that I have not decided what the second prompt is going to be. So it's actually like 11 prompts completed for this. So yeah. So let's go over the book. I'll tell you what her kit prompts I'll use them for, and then the GameNightathon object that I collected. So there's actually 1 book that I had started in June that I rolled over into July, and they didn't really have a GameNightathon prompt that would work with the book. So it just is a thing that I read, but it doesn't really count for anything, so I'll start with that. And that is Why Women Have Better Sex Under Socialism by Kristen R. Ghodsee. This is a nonfiction. It's like an introductory piece on socialist feminism. And it was interesting. I liked it as an introduction, but that is what it is, an introduction. Like, if you know a lot about the topic, if you're well versed in a topic, I don't think you'll learn a lot from this, but as an introductory piece, also for me, because I'm not as well versed in socialist feminism specifically, I thought it was interesting. My biggest issue with it took me a long time to like fully realize what my issue was with this, or like fully be able to put it into words. But so basically the premise is, right, it looks at like the Soviet Union and communist regime there, and how, feminism is linked to that, like how it's inherently a feminist, well, not inherently feminist, but like how feminism and feminist ideas also played into that, and that sort of thing. Um, but the author is American. And so I think she tried to be nuanced in her approach to the Soviet Union, right? So she definitely didn't want the impression that she was like pro Soviet. And so she also like caveated a lot with like criticizing it. But so you sort of got three camps almost. You had the capitalist West, which is bad. You had the socialist Soviet Union, which had some good elements, but in essence is bad. And then you have like socialist democracies, like the Scandinavian countries, and that is paradise, heaven on earth. And in her way in being nuanced, or in her attempts at being nuanced with regard to the Soviet stuff, overall the thing became unnuanced because she would often throw in, as our current nuancing, stuff that had nothing to do with the thing she was talking about. Like, for example, like, okay, yes, it was good that, like, women held positions of power, but also a lot of people died under Stalin's regime, which those two things have nothing to do with each other. Those are completely unrelated. So if you're gonna say that and see that as nuance, then why don't you also say that Scandinavian countries have the highest suicide rates in the world? That is also completely unrelated to the thing you're talking about. But if you're gonna do it with one country and not with another, then you're just like, once again, oversimplifying Soviet bad, Scandinavia good, right? And I think that really, really bothered me in this book. I hope that makes sense. So yeah, I ended up giving it 4 stars because I did think it was interesting. It was accessible and, you know, not necessarily poorly written, but those caveats really annoyed me. Also, there were so many of them. Like, I mean, in the current political climate, it's probably necessary to have that many, which sucks, but it just got really annoying after a while, and I personally didn't think they were necessary. I wish they weren't necessary. So yeah, I don't know, it's hard to slap a rating on this one because, like, I get it, but also ugh. So yeah, I ended up giving it 4 stars. Maybe like on reflection now, it might be more 3.5. But I don't really change my rating on like Goodreads and my spreadsheet and my writing journal and stuff, so I'll stick with the 4 I have written down. But yeah, that is Why Women Have Better Sex Under Socialism by Kristen R. Ghodsee. Then for the actual GameNightathon stuff, so the first prompt that I had was the mushrooms, and for that I read The Sapling Cage by Margaret. Killjoy. There is little mushrooms right here. There's like more on the back, so that's why I did this. This is the first book in the Daughters of the Empty Throne trilogy, which is a YA fantasy about our main character Laurel, who really wants to be a witch, except only women can be witches. And Laurel has certain body parts that are more typically associated with men. But Laurel's best friend is promised to the witches, but she doesn't want that. So Laurel takes her place and discovers that, well, dresses up as a woman, pretends to be a woman, and finds that maybe living as a woman actually aligns better with who she is on the inside. And so we have a story about this trans girl coming to terms with her transness, like learning what it is to be trans, because in this world she doesn't really have a language to describe it. She doesn't really know what being trans is, but just, you know, discovers it, but is kind of afraid to be found out because she doesn't know if, like, the witches will still consider her a woman if they find out that she's trans. And then there's also like a bigger plot with this blight that affects nature and kills nature. And I really like this. I think this was great. Like, I think that the plot was a lot of fun. It worked well. Like, I was invested in it and couldn't put it down. With, like, I don't know, like, the writing style really sucked me in and transported me to this world, which is always nice. I read this book actually because of from a channel of Seks, who I heard about this book from him. He also gifted me this copy for Christmas, so thank you. I really loved it. But I then watched his video on this book, and one observation that he made that I hadn't was that the world kind of feels like an RPG, where, like, you have the witches, and then you have the knights, and then you have the brigands, and, like, sort of choose who you want, like what type of character you want to be, and then, like, they each have their own thing. And I think that that is very interesting, and I feel like they each sort of represent, I don't know, like, it looks at, like, different types of government. I'm not sure if that's the thing, but, like, structuring societies, the power structure in society, you know, like, you have the witches who feel a lot more democratic because, like, they just talk everything out and then they vote and try to agree on something. And then you have this specific order of knights who are like, you make your own rules, just have morals, please, but, like, do whatever. So they're, like, very, like, anarchy type of thing. And then you have these other knights who just follow this duchess, so that's more like aristocracy. And, like, this, you know, I thought that was interesting. And I really like sort of the way in which those were explored, because, again, this is a YA book. I think that there's a lot of things in this book that I really appreciate for a younger audience, and I think they're really important for a younger audience. And there's this one moment where, like, the witches are, again, like, talking and discussing what to do, and it's, like, incredibly inefficient. And there's, like, people, like, not agreeing with the side that our main character is on, and they're, like, you know, like, endlessly keep talking about, like, what are we gonna do? And then their main character is like, ugh, if they would just, like, this is stupid, like, if we would just have it so that everyone had to listen to, I forgot her name, like, the person that was, like, talking in favor of the thing that Laura also wanted. If everyone just had to listen to her, like, we would already be doing stuff. This is so inefficient. To then realize, like, oh no, wait, but, like, by that logic, like, then I'm assuming that, like, the person I agree with is the one in power, whereas someone of the others who disagrees with my ideals could also be in power, and then I would have to listen to them. So, like, okay, yes, this is inefficient, yes, the system is flawed, but I'm kind of happy that it exists because the risks are a little bit high in everything. And I think, like, you know, having that for teenagers, like, sort of that consideration could be quite important and could be quite, you know, like, oh yeah, that's true. And I think that certain ideas about power that maybe I also had at a certain point in my life, you know, if someone would have just told me, like, hey, but, like, think about this, I would be like, oh yeah, right, maybe maybe the way I'm seeing things is a little oversimplified, no? And so yeah, I really thought that was great. I also loved, there is a couple of queer characters in this. So I already said we have Laurel, who's trans, like, the witch is, there's some lesbians there. Like, no one is worried about the lesbians. They're all like, yeah, sure. There is one character that is, like, non-binary, that is not really in the book, but it's mentioned. There is one character that is, like, Arrow Ace. Somewhere on that spectrum. But the thing is, we're living in a world where we don't necessarily have the language to describe these things, where these things are not necessarily, like, mainstream. Like, it's not a queer norm society. This is not a thing that, you know, people haven't heard of trans or non-binary or whatever. But what I feel was interesting is sort of this idea of, even if you don't understand the thing, that doesn't mean you can't respect it. Like, for example, as I said, the non-binary character, you have, you know, like, a person telling Laurel about them and using they them pronouns, and Laurel's like, huh, are there multiple people? And it's like, oh no, but, like, every time my dad mentioned them, he used they them pronouns, so that's just what I do. And then, like, okay, cool, and they just go on with their day. Like, I don't think that either of them really understands the concept of non-binary, doesn't really understand why they're using they them pronouns, but they have this understanding of, you know what, if they ask you to, there is probably a reason, right? And even if I don't know the reason, even if I don't understand the reason, I can still respect their request, you know? So I think that those are a couple things that are, you know, just like basic life skills, that I think are really nice to have in a book targeted at teenagers. So yeah, I really appreciate it. I really loved it. I think it was so much fun to read as well. Like, I also recommend it definitely to adults, because it just, the story was a lot of fun. I had a fantastic time with this. So yeah, I definitely highly recommend. I gave it 5 stars. Freaking loved it. So I'm so glad that I finally read this. Thank you again, Leah, for 1, recommending this book to me, and then 2, gifting it to me. So yeah, that is The Sapling Cage by Margaret Killjoy. I can't wait for the sequel. Then I had the Ghost Icon, for which I read Vera Wong's Guide to Snooping on a Dead Man by Jesse Sutanto, which is the 2nd book in the Vera Wong series. It's a cozy mystery about this old Chinese American lady solving murders. And yeah, this was just interesting. Like, the start was a little bit weird, like how we got to the case. Like, I think it's kind of funny. So we had in the first book that, you know, like, Vera just found a dead body in her tea shop. So, like, that is how she got involved. And I was just like, you know what, I did such a great job solving that murder. I'm gonna, like, solve some more, because I'm good at this, and the police should be grateful that I want to help them in this way. So yeah, like that was like, sure, Vera, sure. And it happens, and we get this new case. I was a bit hesitant going into this because I had mixed feelings on the first book. But I actually really liked this. We had more of the found family, which is like my favorite aspect of the first book because I'm a sucker for found family. Also Vera herself, I found her character quite annoying in the first book, but I didn't have that here. Like, I think that she still had her unique personality, sticking her nose into everything, like knowing better, whatever. But I don't know, she got on my nerves less, which is nice. So yeah, the mystery was quite intriguing. I don't want to spoil too much. Like, if I'm gonna talk about the mystery, I'm gonna spoil things. So I'm not gonna do that. But I will say that, like, the reveal, there was this letter in which, like, the reveal happened, like the thing was explained, and that was so heartbreaking. Like, I had to take a break reading it. Also because I was reading it in public. Like, her cat has secret prompts like every month, and they have to do them in a certain time frame, and one of them is to read a book outside, like entirely outside. So I did that with this book. So I was reading this in public. I was like, I'm not gonna cry over this letter. Like, I need a break. So, yeah, that was really, really heartbreaking. But, you know, some interesting topics being discussed with the mystery and the way it worked. So yeah, great. It's made me crave Chinese food so much. So yeah, I really had a great time with this. Aside from like the heartbreaking stuff in the reveal, like, it was still just a delight. Like, I was smiling my way through most of this book, because it just, you know, just fun and wholesome, and yeah, I loved this. I gave it 5 stars. So as I said, for GameNightathon, I read it for the ghost because of like a thing on the cover that looks kind of like a ghost, and also like a dead man is a ghost. So, you know, I felt like that worked. And then for her kid, I said I did it for the secret prompt, which the reward for the secret prompt was to just mark off any prompt we wanted, like any part of any prompt you wanted, which I used the zombie prompt, which is part of the spooky creatures challenge, because I didn't want to read a book with zombies in it. So yeah, and then for like the actual 2 prompts, because like the secret one is like a 3rd one that you can add on, for like the actual prompts, I used it for BIPOC, I'm pretty sure, BIPOC author, and for the personal challenge, because I had still one to go where I had to catch up on a series, and so this one I caught up with what is released so far of this series. So, really enjoyed this book, really recommend. Then for the next object, I had the flame, and for that I read a Wildfire, flame, fire, pretty obvious, by Hannah Grace, which is the 2nd book in the Maple Hills series. I haven't read the 1st book yet, but it's a romance series. You can read them out of order, it's fine. It's a, I would say, new adult contemporary romance about these 2 people who are, you know, one like a college party, and they end up having a one-night stand, and after that they think like that they're never gonna see each other again, except they ended up both being counselors at the same summer camp, and so they have to spend like all summer together. But there's a very strict rule that like the counselors can't, you know, get too close. I will say. So yeah, this was just fun. It was very entertaining. Is it the best thing I've ever read? No. Is it particularly memorable? Not necessarily, but I had fun. There was some found family in again, which I really love. Also, just in romance, my favorite romance is like two broken people who are having trauma, like emotionally just generally not having a good time, like healing together, which we had here. I like that, where all the conflict is also external to the relationship, which is great. We have some family stuff going on for both of them, which was interesting. So yeah, I really like it. Sometimes there were sentences that was like, are you sure that is how you want to word this? Like, my favorite one is like, I mentioned I had a one night stand, right? And then the next day we have the male main character thinking back to it and being like, a one night stand between two consenting adults, not something I'd usually do. And I was like, I get what you're trying to say with that, but you wrote this. You read it over. An editor read it and was like, this is fine. At no point was there one person who said like, this kind of sounds like your main character is, you know, a bit of a sexual predator. Anyway, I thought that line was kind of funny, that it made it into the final book. But overall, I had a good time with this. It was fun. So I gave it 4 stars. Again, not the most memorable thing, but just sometimes you just need a fun, entertaining thing to read. So Wildfire I used for the prompt of the Avatar challenge, where we have to, the 4 elements, so water, earth, fire, and air. We have to read a book for each of those challenges, and either it can have the element on the cover or in the title. So I did this for the fire prompt because we have fire in the title. And then I also use it for the even bigger rainbow for a book with a pink cover. Then I had the sleeping sheep, and I was like, how the heck am I gonna find a book for sleeping sheep? Really threw me. But then I thought, okay, you know what? Sleeping, bedtime story, children's picture book, right? So I read Big Panda Tiny Dragon because, like, we have, you know, a picture book, which could be used like a bedtime story typically. I mean, this is a picture book for adults, but like still. And then, you know, it's about animals, so sheep. It was the best I could do, okay? Like, I could have done something that was just about sheep or just about sleeping, but I felt like this was my best attempt to combine both of those components into one book. So yeah, I read Big Panda and Tiny Dragon. I'd read a second book in this series actually last year for the Realmathon Peace Talks weekend. And I really liked that, so I was quite hopeful, but also a little bit nervous because I also read The Cat Who Taught Zen, which is by the same author, and I really did not like that. So it was like, where is this going to fall? And unfortunately, it fell more in the camp of The Cat Who Taught Zen. It just felt very preachy. to me. It wasn't, so, I mean, these types of books are like very like heavy-handed in their theming, which you know that in advance, it's fine, like, whatever. But on the nose theming, heavy-handed theming, can be done in a way where it's the characters sort of finding out about this thing together, and like you have to sort of infer it as a reader as well, like you're discovering it with them, or it can be just one character telling another character what the message is. And I really hate the second option, and that was this. It was just like one of the two telling the other, hey, this is the message I'm trying to send right now, which I really don't like. So yeah, also there is not a lot of like cohesion between the different pages and different, like, even if you're like not really making it a story, and you're like, at least if there's like one spread with like, you know, like the left page and the right page, have those be somehow connected, maybe, potentially, because it was really jarring in some places. And it I don't know, it made like the heavy-handed theming even worse, because that way it was just like the author continuously telling me what I was supposed to think, without even like doing the effort of sort of tying it together into a cohesive narrative. Even if it doesn't have plot, it doesn't need to have plot, but like, you know, this made it feel kind of pointless in a way. Like, just, I don't want this cis straight white dude telling me what I have to think about life. I just don't. There were some of the illustrations that were really pretty though. That's why I give it 2 stars instead of 1. But yeah, I didn't love it. I don't think I'll ever read something by this author again, because I had 1 that I liked, and then 2 that were very disappointing. So yeah, that's unfortunate. But yeah. So, as I said, for GameNightathon, I used this for Sleeping Cheap. For HRCYED, I used this for Rainy Series Takedown Challenge, for second book in a series. Well, it is technically the first book, but I've already read the second book. And I'm trying to do the challenge with only finishing series rather than just simply continuing them. So basically, the square for me means like finish a duology, which I've now done with this book, and then also the animals challenge for zoo animal, because we have a panda. Then the object icon that I need to collect was just the number 3, and there were like, it is almost hard to find a book that doesn't like somehow connect to the number 3. I read Pride and Prejudice for this, because it was the 3rd time that I read this book. I love this book. I love Jane Austen. She is hilarious. Like, I was chuckling on every page. This was great. Her characters are fantastic. Like, they're such caricatures, and yet they feel so real. I find it really incredible. And her plots are so intricate and well thought out, but still, like, you know, you're able to follow them pretty well, which I'm just so impressed. I freaking love Austen. Yeah, she's great. I gave it 5 stars. Love her. I didn't do this for HRCYED because like rereads don't really count for it. Well, you can have them count under specific circumstances, but I didn't count this. So no problems for her here for this one, but I did really, really enjoy my reading experience. If you have never read Pride and Prejudice, I definitely recommend. Then, we're almost there. Then I read Half a Soul by Olivia Atwater, and the icon was the wheelchair. So I was like a book about like a disabled people. We have the author and the main character are both neurodivergent, and then there is this one other character who has a metal arm. So, you know, this works well. I say the main character is neurodivergent. That's not really true. It's a metaphor, but I'll get to it. Basically, this is a historical fantasy romance about a girl whose name is Theodora, and at one point a fairy came and wanted to take her soul, but her cousin saved her in time, and so the fairy only managed to take half of her soul. So she still has the other half, but she's not really whole. Like, her emotions, for example, you know, like, she can feel like the long-term underlying thing, but not like the in-the-moment emotion, stuff like that. Doesn't understand social cues either. And so, you know, she has a bit of a hard time in Regency society. Enter the Lord Sorcerer. Oh, what is his name? I forgot his name. Anyway, he is this guy who, like, shocks everyone and, like, very provocative in a lot of ways and blah, blah, blah. And Theodora is just, like, very, like, unimpressed. And he doesn't really manage to, like, get under her skin as much because she's not as, you know, she's not insulted as easily. And so they have a bit of romance between them. He is going to help her get her soul back. Well, half of her soul back from this fairy. There's also this, like, disease going around that he's trying to solve that she ends up helping him with. Stuff like that, just, you know, it was really cute. As I already said, the half a soul thing is, the author mentioned at somewhere that it is in fact a metaphor for neurodivergence, which I didn't know how to feel about that going into it, because it was like, I don't really know if I like that, like, neurodivergent is described as you, like, only having half a soul, thereby kind of saying that you're, like, half a person. But it's not that it was, like, necessarily an actual, it's not like the character was, like, actual neurodivergent and showing traits that are associated with being neurodivergent, and the half soul is sort of a magical explanation for why. It is more that the way she is stigmatized for this thing is similar to how neurodivergent people are stigmatized, and sort of the way people view at her, the way she views herself, you know, like, that can be transported rather than, like, the actual thing itself being the same, if that makes sense. At least that's how I felt, how I interpreted it. And so I was, you know, like, I didn't mind that. I really liked the way it ended. The ending did feel a little bit rushed, though. But that might be because, so I was reading it physically, right? But in the end, there was like a little short story, like sort of a prequel short story thing to it that I didn't know was there. And so if you're reading physically, like you can kind of see it, there's like still quite a few pages left before the end. But you know, I didn't know that those pages were a short story and not like the ending of the story. And so it could be that like my brain was anticipating the story to end later than it actually ended. So maybe that's why it felt rushed. I don't know. But just thematically, I think I like how it ended. I didn't need the epilogue. Didn't need it. I was good. But yeah, I thought it was fun. This was cute. I read it really quickly as well. I give it 4.5 stars. I definitely want to continue the series. So yeah. So I was at for GameNightathon. I used it for the wheelchair prompt. For HRCYED, I used it for Disability Pride Month. Because July is Disability Pride Month, so I wanted to complete that prompt within the month, read at least one book by a disabled author, so I did that. And this is the book that I mentioned earlier that I'm not entirely sure what other prompt I'm going to use it for yet. It fits a couple things, so I'm just going to see a little later on like what other prompts are harder to fill for me. So that is Half Soul by Olivia Atwater. And then the final book that I read was Dante 2 by Miriam Borgermans, which is book 4 in the Slave series, which is a Dutch YA dystopian series. It's set in the far future. The economy at some point has collapsed, which led to slavery being a thing again. And we follow 2 characters, Raven and Dante. The odd books in the series are Raven's POV, the even ones are Dante's POV. And so Raven is a slave. She, in the first book, is accused of murdering her master, and we go from there. And then we have Dante, who is also a slave, and he is tasked to investigate this murder further after the 2 people who are investigating it were both suspiciously disappeared as well. And he's a slave. Like, if he disappears, no one cares, right? Just get another one. So we definitely like went on from where that was. Well, especially Dante's ones, we get into like the politics of this world and conspiracies and the people in power, like people who have money, like take advantage of the power in ways that they should not be allowed to, but they are, because capitalism, it is a commentary on capitalism, this series, and a pretty good one, I think. I really like this. What I appreciate about this, so we have these people in power who have the money, the resources, the people, the whatever, to, maintain their position, to win every battle that they get into, right? And then we have Dante and his crew who are very oppressed and don't have this, and so they have to be very resourceful with how they go about things, and they're able to do that, but still, like, I feel like their resourcefulness only takes them so far. like the powers that be will still, at every step of the way, have the advantage over them. Like, just because they're creative and they have a plan doesn't mean that they suddenly have the upper hand, because they don't, because the system is designed for them not to have it. And so every tiny step they get closer to their goal is a victory that can be taken away from them at any point. And so we don't know if they're trying something, we don't know if they're going to succeed. Actually, they probably won't. And so I think that is, interesting. I really like that. Dante has insane plot armor though. But I don't mind it. I think that I get why. And like the former, like the thing I just mentioned with like the people in power still having the upper hand would not be possible without Dante's plot armor, because then like the story would just be done right. So like I don't mind it in this case. But yeah, there is one point though in this particular book that there's like a certain reveal which is written as if it's some sort of major plot twist. But I thought that this was like common knowledge since like the very beginning of book one. Like I thought that, like, even if it's never said like specifically, I thought that this was like a thing we knew from the start. So that was an odd moment. I was like, yeah, like, how, this is like, I don't know, like, it was a world building thing, and I was like, this is, I thought we knew this already, okay? This is not the sort of shocking plot twist that it seems, by the way it's written, that the author wanted to be. I don't know. That was weird. Other than that, I really like this book. I need to get into it. The thing with this series is we have Raven and Dante who are like alternating perspectives, right? With the books. And so we just have like 600, like 500 or 600 pages from Raven's POV, and then we're slowly switching to Dante. So like it takes a little while to get back into Dante, and then now I've had like 600 something pages of Dante, and so if I read like the next book, it'll take a little while to get back into Raven's part, probably. So like that is something that's just the nature of switching back and forth. Like if it's a normal, like if it's like one book where like we alternate chapters, it also takes me like a little, like a sentence or like a couple sentences into the chapter to like really reestablish of where we were with this POV. So like it makes sense that it takes me a little bit longer if it's like a full book. So I'm not really faulting the series for that. I do think I get why it's written like this, and I think that is very interesting in certain points to like have a full book and then jump back in time and like do a full thing. But I think for this particular one, I think I might have preferred it if they were just like alternating chapters rather than alternating books. I think that there are certain elements in this book that would have worked a little bit better if that were the case. But other than that, I had a great time with this. I'm giving it 4 stars. I really like the series. I'm reading it so fast. I'm eating it up. So yeah, it's great. For GameNightathon, I use this for the coins because, as I already said, it's a commentary on capitalism, money, coins. And then for HRCYED, I used this for the series Staircase. We have to read a standalone, a duology, a trilogy, and then we have to read one series that is 4 books or more. But for the duology and the trilogy, we have to read like the entire thing. During HRCYED, so like a full duology, a full trilogy. For the 4+ book series, it can be a series that you've already started as long as you have at least 4 books left. So that is what I'm doing here. So it's the first one for that. And then I also used it for the last 10 years prompt, which is to read a book published in each year of like the last 10 years. And I used this for 2018. So that was the full wrap up. I'll give you my favorite book of the month. Maybe based on my reviews, you already know, or you can already guess what it is. But it's Sapling Cage. I freaking love this. This was amazing. I recommend it to everyone. So yeah, that was my favorite book of the month. And so yeah, that is the wrap up. I hope you enjoyed. It's a long one because I am wordy. Let me know if you've read any of these books, what you thought of them. And let me know what your favorite book was that you read in July. And I will see you again in the video. Bye.